the United States has given Iran a final choice. They're saying if Iran doesn't negotiate, they'll attack. They've made it clear that if an agreement isn't reached this time, they'll take immediate military action. Let's take a closer look at this today. Let's get right into it. President Trump spoke to reporters in the Oval Office about the Middle East war's future direction. President Trump stated there are two options: resolve the issue with military force or reach an agreement through negotiations. He made it clear that while he prefers a resolution through agreement, he is prepared to escalate military action if Iran does not respond to negotiations. President Trump said we can maintain current airstrikes or escalate them to a much higher level. He went on to say that we are ready to launch and are prepared to take immediate action. This is being interpreted to mean that the current military operation may not remain limited, and that the United States can immediately carry out additional attacks if it decides to do so. Earlier, President Trump said in an interview with Axios that he is considering the possibility of a large-scale attack on Iran more than ever before. He stated that he is on the verge of making a decision and that all preparations have been completed. He has publicly suggested considering a stronger military operation than past airstrikes. The New York Times reported that President Trump met with top security advisors to consider expanding attacks on Iran. This means that even within the White House, they are reviewing to what extent to escalate the current military response and considering the international repercussions and risks that additional attacks might bring. Some say if the United States increases its attacks, it could target more than just military sites in Iran. But these days, the news we're hearing is about whether or not ground troops will be deployed. In fact, since it's difficult to completely eliminate Iran's military capabilities with just airstrikes and missile attacks, there are also arguments that if the United States wants to shake the Iranian regime itself or achieve long-term military objectives, a ground operation would be necessary. From the US perspective, sending ground troops to Iran would carry a significant political burden. Iran is a country whose size and population are difficult to compare with Iraq or Afghanistan, and there is also the possibility that it could lead to an occupation campaign. There will likely be strong opposition in the United States to sending large numbers of ground troops to the Middle East again. Prolonged military involvement in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars continues to burden both American politicians and the public. Even if the United States expands military actions, some analysis suggests it will likely pressure Iran's military capabilities in limited ways at first, using large-scale airstrikes, naval operations, and occupying certain islands. Deploying ground troops is likely the last option for the United States. However, some actions differ from President Trump's call for a strong military response. On July 25th Korean time, the US stopped its airstrikes on Iran after nearly 2 weeks of attacks. Previously, attacks on Iranian military sites occurred mainly in the early morning, but that day saw no new airstrikes reported. This drew more attention since it followed President Trump mentioning possible expanded attacks. Some say the United States has stopped military operations, while others think it's just a temporary move before more negotiations. In particular, President Trump has stated that military action is ready, but at the same time, he has emphasized the possibility of dialogue with Iran. It is still unclear whether this halt in airstrikes is a move to secure time to find a diplomatic solution or a process to prepare for a larger-scale operation. However, as tensions between the United States and Iran rise, we are actually seeing larger clashes occurring in other regions. Specifically, there was a military conflict between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Saudi Arabia carried out airstrikes on the Red Sea port of Hodeidah and the nearby Qamaran Island, currently controlled by the Houthi rebels. Al Masirah TV, a media outlet affiliated with the Houthi rebels, reported that Saudi forces attacked communication facilities in the area and claimed that a woman was injured in the process. The Houthis also stated that their air defense system repelled several Saudi military aircraft. However, the Saudi side has not provided any specific confirmation regarding the Houthis' claims. This Saudi airstrike followed a Houthi attack on a Saudi vessel. On the 20th, Houthi rebels blocked Red Sea passage for vessels linked to Saudi Arabia, and on the 23rd claimed to have attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the Red Sea. Recently, they attacked another oil tanker. In response, Saudi Arabia seems to have launched attacks on the Houthi rebels, who then strongly protested the Saudi airstrikes. On July 25th, Houthi rebels issued a statement and began retaliating against Saudi-led coalition military operations. In their statement, the Houthi rebels said that in response to the Saudi coalition fighter jets attacking their controlled areas in the Red Sea's Al Hudaydah province, they will act according to the principle of responding to escalation with escalation from now on. The Houthi side criticized Saudi Arabia for taking military action rather than negotiating to lift the blockade on areas under their control. They also defined this attack as a clear act of hostility against them, warning that Saudi Arabia has made a grave mistake and will pay a harsh price for it. After the statement, Houthi rebels launched missile strikes on Saudi oil refineries and industrial sites, and sounds of explosions were heard in various parts of Saudi Arabia. First, an Aramco-owned oil facility in the Jizan Industrial Zone, a key economic zone on the Red Sea coast in southwestern Saudi Arabia, was hit. Air raid sirens were also heard in various places. As clashes between Houthi rebels and Saudi Arabia escalated, the global supply chain was gripped by fear. With the Red Sea route possibly closing after the Strait of Hormuz, countries reliant on Middle Eastern oil and raw materials are becoming more concerned. The Red Sea is a major trade route connecting Europe and Asia, and if it gets blocked, ships will have to detour around Africa to the Cape of Good Hope to travel from Europe to Asia. If this happens, shipping costs will rise, significantly impacting prices. With Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea has become a vital alternative to help the global energy market. After the Strait of Hormuz was blocked, Saudi Arabia began exporting about 3.6 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products daily through the Red Sea. Most crude oil on this route was bound for Asia. However, when the Houthi rebels declared a maritime blockade against Saudi Arabia and actually attacked 2 oil tankers, supply chain instability occurred again. President Donald Trump of the United States has stated that any further attacks by the Houthi rebels will be considered Iran's responsibility, and that both Iran and the Houthi rebels will face significant military punishment. Nevertheless, the Houthi rebels continue to threaten passing merchant ships. As a result, oil prices are rising again. In this situation, China has stepped in diplomatically to prevent further escalation of the conflict between the United States and Iran. It is reported that China has asked Pakistan to once again mediate and help resume negotiations between the two countries. China asked Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar, who visited Shanghai on the 16th, to help mediate tensions between the US and Iran, according to Xinhua news agency and Al Jazeera. China appears to be using diplomatic channels through Pakistan rather than direct negotiations. Behind China's active involvement are its economic interests. China has a long-standing trade relationship with Iran and is a major buyer of Iranian crude oil. With the ongoing Strait of Hormuz blockade and Gulf attacks, pressure on China's energy supply and trade is rising. A Pakistani official said Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and attacks on Gulf countries are significantly harming China's interests. In particular, there are concerns that if both the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at the entrance to the Red Sea become unstable at the same time, it could have a significant impact on the supply of Middle Eastern energy and the maritime logistics network connecting Asia and Europe. Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, and Ishaq Dar, the deputy prime minister, called for an immediate cessation of hostilities between the United States and Iran after their talks. They said the two sides should resume diplomatic contact and pursue a comprehensive peace agreement through negotiations. China said the existing memorandum of understanding on ending the war should remain in place and will keep supporting Pakistan's mediation efforts. Pakistan has also taken concrete diplomatic steps. It is reported that Iskandar Momin recently met with Iran's Minister of the Interior to discuss the possibility of resuming negotiations. During this process, the Pakistani side reportedly conveyed the opinion that, for talks with the United States to resume, Iran must stop its attacks on Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. China also delivered a direct message to Iran. Minister Wang Yi met Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Foreign Ministers meeting, stressing that if the door to talks is open, it shouldn't be closed again. He also urged the implementation of existing agreements, the resolution of the Hormuz issue, and the improvement of relations between Iran and the Gulf countries. Minister Araghchi responded that Iran remains open to negotiations, but blamed the heightened tensions on the United States failing to honor agreements. He said the United States should keep its promises, show restraint, and ask China to be more active diplomatically.